human beings who are aligned with their own purpose, they are infectious to work with because they're so rare. Most people are out there in the sort of grind set, so to speak, because they either are deeply unsatisfied in their job, they are trying to heal themselves from a feeling of their own insignificance, they have unresolved wounds within them. And so when somebody shows up genuinely wanting to help, genuinely wanting to be of service, genuinely wanting to do better for the world, etc., those people are infectious. And I think it's Alex Hormozy who talks extensively about, which is there are two different types of people who go into business. So you have missionaries and you have mercenaries. A missionary is somebody who's on a mission and the business is seen as a means to serve that mission. The mercenary is someone who studies the market conditions, studies their competitors, and looks to monopolize and colonize that market. Now, like you said, when you said it's tough out there, when the going gets tough, the mercenaries end up giving up because they think, who cares? I'll go study some other market and maybe the market conditions will be easier there. But the missionaries don't. And because they're on a mission, because they have purpose, they end up weathering those storms and getting through, and thus end up making more money in the end. And so it ends up coming full circle in terms of one's concerns anyway.
What up, Entrepreneur Masters? Welcome to the Persistent Entrepreneur Podcast, where grit meets inspiration. My name's David Hill, two-time author, business coach, world-class sales trainer, top real estate broker, Iron Man, 23 years sober. My mantra is I exist to persist. Each week, I'll bring you powerful stories from relentless entrepreneurs, visionary business owners, and trailblazing leaders who have mastered perseverance like me. Get ready to uncover actionable strategies, mindset shifts, and the inspiration you need to conquer your goals. Let's persist one day and one story at a time. Enjoy. Hey, what's up, Masters? Welcome to another episode of the Persistent Entrepreneur Podcast. Today, we are with Max Stevens. Max, what is going on, sir?
Very nice to meet you, Dave. Look forward to a conversation today.
Absolutely. And Max is the author of a book called What the F Do You Really Want? It's actually the F word. And he also works with executives, entrepreneurs, and high performers who have achieved traditional success. Listen to this, but feel like something's missing, right? I don't know, at least me, I'm like never satisfied. So I don't know, maybe I fit right in that group, or maybe you do as well, listening to this right now. And so through a sharp, no BS approach, he dismantles outdated success narratives, helping individuals discover their authentic contribution, the key to unlocking their deepest potential, blending philosophy, psychology, and real-world application. Max's work isn't about abstract theory. It's about getting people to a tangible, measurable way of living at the highest level. So, man, I appreciate you being here today. Thank you for joining us on the Persistent Entrepreneur.
My absolute pleasure. I think it's great work that you guys do, and I was looking forward to our chat today.
All of our listeners are entrepreneurs, salespeople, different industries, real estate, insurance, auto, mortgage. It's a grind, bro. It's a grind out there, man. Why should they be buying a book that says, what the F do you really actually want?
Yeah, so good question. So a big part of my journey in terms of the patterns that I have noticed in a lot of high performers that I have had the pleasure of working with is that they often build their journey on really shaky ground. So what I mean by that is that, for example, I can't tell you how many clients I've had come to me and say, Max, I'd really love to work with you to double the size of the revenue in the company. And then I will ask, okay, you could have come to me for anything. Why do you want that particular goal? Why do you want to double the size of the revenue? And they'll say something to the effect of, so I can prove to all of those people who said that I couldn't do it, that I can. And then I would say, don't you think a better use of our time together is just to forgive those people? Because then that would make your goal moot, right? And so that sort of dynamic, because what ends up happening is your goal or your journey is born of, and because it's born of that particular pain point, what ends up happening is you are trying to use an external outcome to reconcile an internal emotional pain point, which is impossible. And so a lot of these sort of dynamics end up playing out within a lot of high performers, which ultimately leads them to being chronically unsatisfied. I'll give you another example. So many other clients will come to me and say, Max, I really just need someone in my corner to hold me accountable. And then I'll say, okay, don't you think the conversation you and I need to be having is why you feel like you need someone to hold you accountable in the first place? Because then you don't need me at all. And so we get into these interesting dynamics within a lot of high performers' psyches. And if you look at the narrative arc of a high performer and how their journey ends up playing out, they are often chronically unsatisfied because they are attempting to heal themselves of an emotional pain point through their entrepreneurial pursuits, which gets us into a lot of dynamics around like having to grind, having to hustle. The journey is painful in some ways. And so my work fundamentally has been about allowing those pain points to integrate through working with me. Thus, their journey moves faster, it moves smoother, and they end up making more money and being more successful in the end.
Magic question. Are they more satisfied as well? Do they feel more fulfilled?
Yeah,
Or are
yeah,
they
yeah, because this is the whole counterintuitive thing, right? Is that when we show up, like I talk extensively about the notion of contribution, like when we show up from that place of contribution, the counterintuitive thing is, yeah, of course you'll feel more fulfilled because you'll be making a meaningful difference and all that sort of stuff. But you'll be more successful than ever before because everyone's going to want to work with you. Like you will not have any challenge attracting clients, retaining them, charging premium prices. It's like all of those things that invariably your listeners would care about. All of those things just get taken care of by default.
why does that happen?
Because human beings who are aligned with their own purpose, they are infectious to work with because they're so rare. Most people are out there in the sort of grind set, so to speak, because they either are deeply unsatisfied in their job, they are trying to heal themselves from a feeling of their own insignificance, they have unresolved wounds within them. And so when somebody shows up genuinely wanting to help, genuinely wanting to be of service, genuinely wanting to do better for the world, etc., those people are infectious. And I think it's Alex Hormozy who talks extensively about, which is there are two different types of people who go into business. So you have missionaries and you have mercenaries. A missionary is somebody who's on a mission and the business is seen as a means to serve that mission. The mercenary is someone who studies the market conditions, studies their competitors, and looks to monopolize and colonize that market. Now, like you said, when you said it's tough out there, when the going gets tough, the mercenaries end up giving up because they think, who cares? I'll go study some other market and maybe the market conditions will be easier there. But the missionaries don't. And because they're on a mission, because they have purpose, they end up weathering those storms and getting through and thus end up making more money in the end. And so it ends up coming full circle in terms of one's concerns anyway.
How does somebody know? Let's break it down. Like two people, like someone shows up, two different people show up in front of you. How does somebody know if one person's focused on a mission and the other isn't? What are the
Because
differences?
because the mission is not about me. The mission is about trying to better somebody else's life. If somebody is a mercenary, it's about me. It's about me and what I can get. Yep.
But how do they know that? Do they feel it, or is that the words that they're using? Or
There's many tells, but like an easy check-in that your sort of listeners can do is just to ask themselves, does my business exist for me or does it exist for the people that the business serves? And in that answer, if one is radically honest, you'll find it.
and then on the other side of it, for you all listening, how does somebody show up the other way, where it's like you can tell all they care about is getting the sale, making the next sale, paying the next bill, whatever it is. Can people feel that? And what are some of the tells on that side?
Of course, everybody has had that experience where they've been dealing with a salesperson or a business owner or doing a deal. And you can feel in that dynamic whether somebody is out for your best interest or whether they're out for their own. You can feel it, right? And we're like human beings are highly intuitive and we have hundreds of thousands of years of living, learning, and existing within tribes in the Amazon, and not just the Amazon, all over the world. And invariably what ends up happening is there's a gut intuition that we have about certain people when they are out for their own best interest. You can smell it. And really good business people, certainly in my approximation and certainly in terms of my clients as well, you can feel it. You can feel it.
So we're going to assume that the listeners here, most of them are just there because they want to do well in life, and maybe they're not clear, right, Max, on their purpose yet. And so I can see how, because I was there for a long time, and when things don't go my way, how does it show up? It shows up as me getting frustrated, as opposed, right? Like when somebody's saying, I'm thinking about going in another direction or whatever it might be, there's
Mhm.
like a level of frustration that starts to come out of you when you're all about yourself and not about solving the problem. So, how do people find that purpose?
Masters, we're going to get you right back to the show. I want to talk to you real quick about our Real Estate Listings Club. If you're a real estate agent and you want to master the listing game, you need to look at our club. We have over 130 online lessons that you can do. We're on group training, coaching calls where you can get Q&A, you ask questions, you get live training, you do role plays, and then we also have a live call session every week. We have top real estate agents all over the country that are all together, collaborating with each other, supporting each other, holding each other accountable, and taking listings. So check out realestatelistings.club. It's the best investment you will ever make into your real estate business. And then finally, don't forget about our new tool. It's called Ringleader AI. Go to our site, ringleaderai.net, or test drive it for yourself. Call right now, 774-214-2076. Take a test drive and let us know what you think. Guys, all these tools are available on my site, which is davidhill.ai. Again, davidhill.ai. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Great question. So before we even get into the actual, I will share about how they can do this, right? But before we even get there, like there's certain milestones by way of one's personal development that certainly in my approximation we need to cross first. And there's three fundamental pillars that I and the first is when we are starting a new chapter or attempting to move forward, we want to make sure that if any remnants of our old chapters isn't being carried through with us. And that's where the first pillar, in my mind at least, is forgiveness. So we look at anything that you are hanging on to from previous chapters in your life, and we make sure that chapter is completely closed, right? One of the things I do every year is I do like an apology tour. So I write down anybody that I may have had even the slightest little things with over the past year, and I make sure that I always keep my psyche clean. And so a big part of that, a little bit like the example that I gave before around so I could prove to all those people who said that I couldn't do it, that I can, is the problem is when we don't forgive, what ends up happening is it creates blind spots in our experience as we move forward, and we don't want that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is an awareness of one's own death, because the reality is that you are not going to live forever, right? And so because you are not going to live forever, there is no quote unquote safe road, because this is a huge thing that people get into when we start having conversations about security, finances, family provision, all that sort of stuff. When we start getting into that particular conversation, invariably those conversations about security and safety end up coming to the surface. And so being able to recognize you are not going to live forever. And so the safe road and the unsafe road, they lead to the same place. So you might as well have the adventure of your life. And then the third, so we have forgiveness, we have an awareness of one's own mortality. And then the third is radical honesty. When we are setting goals, one of the challenges that we have is a lot of our goals are inherited. They are inherited by our culture. They are inherited by our collective narrative. They are inherited by our family. So there's a lot of baggage that we can carry when we're trying to look for our purpose. Between these three pillars, that then puts firm ground under our feet to find our purpose. Now, to your point, actually finding that purpose is also the result of three equations. The first component of that equation is what I use this language in the book. I talk a lot about your gifts. Now, I have an alternative perspective around what gifts are, that your gifts are actually not meant for you. Your gifts are actually meant for somebody else. They just happen to flow through you. And so one of the challenges when we get into conversations about gifts is that gifts often come so easily to us that we dismiss them. And so one of the exercises I have people do in the book is I go and ask 10 people in your life that you respect what your gifts are, and they'll tell you. Let them tell you, because we have this weird idea about gifts, that gifts are from the universe to me, and they're just the things that come easily to me. But that's a very myopic way of understanding that word gift. They just happen to flow through you. So that's the first part of the equation. then when I look out at the world, the question becomes, who do I want to serve in the world using these gifts? And if I was to borrow a little bit more sort of entrepreneurial language, that's when it comes down to finding your market, finding your niche, working out your target market, all that sort of stuff. And so between these two things, when we look at your gifts and we look at who you want to serve, the third part of the equation is we need a place to start, because often what ends up happening is most people get caught in trying to put together the perfect plan. But the thing is, if you lay out steps 1 through 10, by the time you take steps 1 through 6, the chances that step 7 will manifest itself as you saw it at step 1 is like 0. And so the idea is like, just start doing it. And as you start doing it, your gifts will inform who you serve. Who you inform will also inform your gifts. And the place and where you end up needing to move to will change over time as you start to do that. And so between these 6 things, right, between these sort of 3 earlier pillars around forgiveness, mortality, and honesty, and then we have your gifts and those who you choose to serve, and we need a place to start, that puts very firm epistemic ground under our feet when it comes to finding our purpose.
Wow. All right, man. That was a clear answer, brother. Talk about the awareness of death, though. I want to go back to that for a minute.
Yep.
I find that interesting. Help us understand why that's important.
Because death, or one's mortality, it is the ultimate priority aligner, because often we get caught up a lot in our own petty concerns and we forget the fact that life is very short. And if you take a look at the regrets of the elderly, it is always reported when they are asked, like, what was the biggest regret in your life? Invariably, it is something to the effect of, I lived a life that wasn't really mine. I married the person that I didn't think that I should, but I ended up doing. I had these dreams that I gave up on because of my parents or whatever. I lived a life in some ways that wasn't really mine. There's a wonderful book for all of your listeners if they're interested. It's called The Denial of Death, and it's by a German philosopher named Ernest Becker. And he says that until human beings can grasp that their life is finite, meaningless, and will ultimately be forgotten, one cannot truly begin to live, because any action that human beings engage in by way of purpose before one grasps that their life is finite, meaningless, and will be forgotten is what he refers to as an immortality project, which is like trying to grasp at the idea of trying to live forever.
I wrote that down. So how does somebody get to that point where they realize that their life is, besides listening to our podcast and hearing it from us, but really getting there finite, meaningless, and will be forgotten? How does somebody get to that point?
Yes. Just start to notice that it is already the case. It is already true. It's not something that somebody needs to get to. It's something that one can recognize is already the case. It just depends on how many generations you want to go later. Like if I go 1 generation later, 99% of people may forget me. If I go 2 generations, almost certainly everybody. If I go 3 generations, it's almost a certainty. Anything beyond that,
I mean, I understand the meaning.
Become a bit silly.
So so I guess why is that important? The forgotten part, though, isn't it the fact that life is finite?
Because you're free. It doesn't matter. There's nothing real at stake. So go after it with everything that you have.
That's kind of how I look at it. It's a great reminder that you're right. You never know, right? And the last day, you won't even know it. I guess maybe you will. I don't know. It depends on what your beliefs are, but
you won't know it. But more to the point, in my view, that absolutely will happen.
Interesting. I've never had this conversation before on the podcast, and it's interesting and true. So you're right. You're 100% right.
I can remember years and years ago, I stayed in India when I was really young, and I would have been about 17 at the time. And I was talking with this, and I was super ambitious, like ridiculously ambitious at that age. And I was sharing with this monk about my goals and all these things that I wanted to do. And I said, what about you? How did you end up becoming a monk? And the monk ended up sharing similar sort of distinctions to the ones that I'm sharing at the moment, around the fact that it's all a cosmic play and nothing really means anything in the end and all this sort of stuff. And I said back to this monk, you're really trampling on my dream. I've got these dreams to make the world better and to have a big impact and all this sort of stuff. And you're telling me that it's all meaningless in the end and that there is no meaning to it all. And the monk turned back to me and said, yes, that might be true, but why not make the world a better place? And I thought, that's spot on, because the idea of detachment is that there's no reason to do anything, but there's also no reason not to. And so understand that, grasping that, you are completely free. You can actually be more productive than ever before. You can achieve more than ever before. You can be braver in sales conversations than ever before. All that sort of stuff.
That was going to be my next question, actually, and I'm glad you kind of shared the story of the monk, because there is that different. How do you discern, like, between not having any meaning and wanting to make the impact, right? Like in the moment, I get what you're saying, but that thing where it's, hold on a minute, if none of this has any meaning, then what am I even doing?
Great question.
And
yeah,
I think you answered it.
Yeah,
with the monk.
Yeah, that's right. But you're not grasping how deep it goes. If there is no meaning, then you can go after it with even more veracity.
So even if you lose all your money, you lose your home, everything's gone.
Because look, I need to be nuanced with this perspective, right? I'm obviously not advocating that should happen or that I hope that it happens. But the reality is that even if that does happen, versus if you're a roaring, raging success and all of your dreams end up coming true, you end up in the same place anyway. And that's what I mean. There's nothing real at stake. So you can go after it as much as you like.
I remember years ago when I was listening to, I think it was Tim Ferriss's podcast, and he was talking about, God, who was it now? It might have been Elon Musk. I think it was when Elon sold PayPal. Was that his first company, PayPal? Oh, I don't know if it was Elon.
No.
Anyway,
right.
Yeah, but he was just talking about the level of some of these people are so successful, and you just look at them and say, like, wow, how can, for me, the way I look at it is, why are they there? If they can do that, if they can have that level of wealth and success, why can't I? Like, why don't I have it? If it's available to them, then it's available to me. It's just something that is missed, that I'm not doing. Right?
Yeah, I would certainly argue there's this myth that gets thrown around in high performance, like this idea of high performance, that high performance is a laser-like focus on results. And high performance, it's a far closer approximation of high performance is a laser-like focus on behaviors. So if you think of the difference between input and output, so closing sales deals is an output. Having sales meetings is an input. Going to the gym is an input. Being healthy and being fit and all those things is an output. Having meaningful conversations is an input. Having a great marriage and family life is an output. And so there is like a number of inputs that is required to get said output. The conversation just shifts to whether that's worth making that trade. So I'll give you an example. So I have a client of mine who was the CEO or MD of a major like software solutions company in Australia. It was also in South Africa. Like, he's a very successful guy, and he wanted to move out and do his own thing. Like, he wanted to start his own business, and in the same sort of space. He's really good technically, like with the software and all that sort of stuff. He's rather poor interpersonally, like when it comes to sales, like running meetings, all that sort of stuff. He's not great at that. When we first started working together, I said to him, how many contracts do you need with your new business to replace your income? And he said 5. And I said, how many meetings would it take you where it would be unreasonable that you wouldn't get 5 contracts? And he was like, let's assume that your skills didn't improve. So your communication skills didn't improve, your interpersonal skills didn't improve, none of that improved. How many would it take you? And he was like, 60. And I said, okay, then that's what we're going to do. We're going to have 60 meetings. And so the only thing that we were measuring week on week is the input. And now, now we've been working together for 5-6 months, and he's up to meeting number 54 or something like that. And he's quite literally at 4 out of 5 contracts over the line. And so it just becomes about whether it's worth making those trades. Like Musk, I don't know much about his story. I imagine he's an obscenely hard worker. And so it's like, that's what you get. It's like you make those trades, and this is what you get in exchange. And it just becomes whether it's worth it to you to make those trades.
I think the reason too I brought him up is because I think if you listen to the story, they sold PayPal. I think it was either him or what's his name, the other guy, the richest guy, Bezos. I think it was Elon. He sold the company for he made 600 million, and he took the 600 million and he just threw it right into the next thing. and literally was like everything, like all in, sleeping on couches, pretty much homeless. And that it just that's what reminded you for whatever reason you what you had shared reminded me of that. Fuck it.
Yeah.
All in,
Yeah.
right? It's all in. And I think a lot of those guys operate at that level.
Yep. Yep. I would agree.
I think what I'm taking from this is there's that level of scarcity or fear that holds most of us back. And when you've realized that
Yep.
we're all going to die anyway,
That's right. Let it rip. Go for it.
yeah, I love it, man. What am I not asking that I should have asked?
Nothing at all. You do a wonderful job. I watched a bunch of episodes that you've done before you had me on. I've read a bunch about you and stuff like that. No, I think it's great. Let me ask you something. Like, you're in the business of helping people become more successful. Tell me what success means to you.
Success means to me is serving people and helping people live to their potential. I think most people don't live to their potential. For me, being a dad, I coached my daughter's softball team, and Wednesday night, I had my daughter pitch, and she didn't do good, man. She walked 4 people in a row. She was out there sweating. I was thinking about even maybe pulling her out, but we left her in. And then she was at the end, came in horrified. Oh my God, Dad, I was going to cry. My stomach hurt. And I said, it's amazing. That's amazing. Now
Right.
we're going to do that again. And now you went through that. You experienced that. So that's about as bad as it's going to get. And so next time, and she's excited to go back. But the point I'm making is how many kids would say, I'll never do that again? Not her. We had her out yesterday throwing balls into a net and practicing it because she's just becoming a pitcher. So to me, it's about being a great father and it's helping people to live to their potential. And our business, man, when I help one person, it's the butterfly effect. They help another person, which then helps another person.
Yeah.
And I think there's just, I grew up fucked up since we talked. My childhood was as fucked up as you can get, bro. My family, father, even where I am right now is a miracle in itself, man.
Yeah, no, it's a really profound point that you raise about parenting and that scarcity idea that we were speaking about before. Because invariably, when I'm working with people who will jump or start their own companies or businesses, etc., and they say, "But Max, I have a family to provide for. It's not easy. It's not as easy as you're saying it." And I said, "I'm not suggesting by any means that any of this is easy, but you should be afraid. But let's lay out two fears here. So fear A is that you jump and you start your own business or whatever, jumping into your purpose, or run into financial difficulties that strains your relationship. Maybe you guys even have to move house, whatever, right? Let's really flesh that fear out, right? That's scary. That's super scary. But so that's fear A. Let's look at fear B. So say for your daughter as an example. Now you imagine in some ways that when your child becomes of age and they are trying to work out what they want to do with themselves, and they say, "Dad, I've got this option here, but this is the thing that I really want to do, and what should I do?" And you say, "Sweetheart, like totally back yourself, go for it, and go into your purpose and live it and all that sort of stuff." And your daughter was to turn back to you and say, "You didn't do that, so why should I?" And so which of these fears would be more painful? Because both of them could be. And it comes down in some ways whether you would like to be an example or a warning to your kids. And so
it's interesting.
In my view, certainly in my view and in conversations that I've had with many clients, is fear B is much more frightening in the end.
That's a regret, right? You hear that a lot.
It's a very myopic view of parenting, certainly in my view, that your only responsibility is to provide for them financially.
And the reason, to me, it's important that my daughter, I never had a father that helped me with stuff like that. And my other daughter she's does competition dance, and she's had 4 competitions, and every competition, and she's a rock star. She just will go and dance anywhere, do cartwheels in front of you, whatever. She just knows how to show up. She's got that special superpower. And
awesome.
Every time I've seen her at the awards, I can't see her because she's sitting in the back. And I'm like, why are you sitting behind other kids? I can't see you. Oh, Dad, that's how they want. I said, I don't care what they want, how they want you to sit. I want you sitting in the front. And she's, oh, Dad, I can't. I said, Penny, next time I go, if I'm going to go to I want to see you sitting in the front. And she said, okay, Dad. At the last competition, she was, because she's only 7 and this kid's way bigger than her. So she sits behind the other kids. You can't see her, but if she sits in front of the other kids, you'll still see the other kids, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yep.
I said to her, I said, Penny, how did it feel sitting in the front? She's, oh my God, Dad, it was amazing. I said, that's what I was looking for. And it's those are the little lessons. And the same thing with Samara with pitching. Yeah, you had a bad game, but so what? You're going to do it again. And now you can go back to that next time. So anyway, those are the types of lessons I want to teach my kids because I never had that. Nobody taught me that. And I had a guy on earlier that we do networking groups called Master Networks, and they have groups all over the country. And one of the things I learned from him is he did a big event with 300-400 people. And he had his kids on the stage with him, like sharing stuff. And I said, that's such a good idea. And so I want to do that with my kids too. So now
That's
when
very
we
cool.
have the networking group, I bring my kids, when my kids don't have school, they come to the group with me, and there's 25 members, and they have to do their 30-second commercial every week when they're with me. It gets them more confident and comfortable talking in public to people. So you asked me earlier, what am I passionate about? And that's what I'm passionate about, brother. And then the money just helps me fund a life so we can travel and take vacations and live in a nice house and do things like that. And yeah, life's good, man. I
Yeah,
love the
I'm
the
happy for
conversation.
you.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah, I just feel like, what if I do lose everything and we do have to get rid of our house and go live somewhere else? I'll be honest, man.
You're a great example. You're a great example, that what you have done, certainly as I listen to it, when I've listened to your story and where you've come from and where you're at now and all that sort of stuff, you are in a space where you are serving people. And because you are showing up in some ways to serve, good things are happening for you, and they should. Don't misappropriate in some ways what is being shared. It's more for those people who are afraid of really stepping into a life of purpose, for want of a better way of saying it. They have something that's keeping their head above water. They have something that is feeding their family. They have something, but it's not the thing, and they know it's not the thing, right? That's more the point that I'm getting at. It's for those people. It's not really, quote unquote, for people like you.
Yeah, I think for all of us listening, I think all of us have ambitions. I look at people that are doing things that I wouldn't say a better dad than me. So I think I'm a pretty good dad, for the most part. Maybe I'm sure there's other good dads out there. And I feel like I'm a decent husband for the most part. I do my best to try to listen to my wife and be a good husband.
Yep.
And I have friends that have a private jet and stuff, right? I don't have a private jet. So it's kind of like those things. I kind of want to have a.
Yeah. Is that something that's important to you?
I don't know. That's a great question. I think overall in life, probably, I think it would be important to me, which I don't need to even own a jet to do this, but maybe I'd like to have access to a jet so I could have dinner in one continent and then have breakfast in another, or vice versa. And I think that would be a cool experience.
That certainly would be a cool experience. I think one of the things that I've often thought about by way of success, if we go back pre-industrial revolution, trade was largely done on the basis of utility. So Dave, you've got some eggs, I've got some sheepskin. Why don't we swap? Because you need some eggs, I need some sheepskin, or whatever, right? And so what ended up happening after we had the Industrial Revolution is we had a surplus of goods. And so that left a really interesting question for the quote unquote powers that be, which is how do we convince people to buy more than what they need? And so began the rise of advertising. And so it was no longer about utility, it was now about identity. So identity itself has now become commodified. This is one thing I talk a lot about in the book. If you take something like a Gucci scarf, right? So you've got your scarf. You don't actually buy this, you buy what having that says about you for having it. So it says elegance, it says sophistication, it says success, etc. Here's the thing though, is that story that I'm buying, right? When next year's scarf is released, right? My scarf no longer says elegance, sophistication, and success. Now my scarf says I'm falling behind because there's a new one. And yeah, it's the same. And so the story of success, the trap that in some ways we're caught in, is that story, it doesn't stick to the item. It moves from item to item. Like your buddy who's got a jet, it's like his mate has got two.
That's right.
So it just leaps from item to item. And so what ends up happening, and this is what I mean around what do you actually want, right? Like what the F do you actually want? Because I'm like, this is an inherited goal that you have. I really need to have this scarf. And no, you don't. You just don't realize, you're not even after the scarf. You're after what owning that scarf says about you.
That's true.
And once you have it, once next year's scarf is out, it's not going to be that scarf anymore. You're going to want the new one, and then ad infinitum. And that's the game that we're collectively playing, albeit without realizing it at times.
How do people get a copy of your book?
So they're welcome to just come onto the website. So maxstevenscoaching.com. Stevens is spelt with a PH. There's a page there they can find the book really easily. And yeah, they can also book in if they want to have a chat with me as well. Always happy to have conversations.
All right, man. Good stuff. I really enjoyed the conversation with you today. It was fun. It was eye-opening in a lot of ways. And thank you, man. What final thoughts on today's conversation?
No, my pleasure. And thanks for taking the time to have me as well.
Yeah, man. Let's give you the last word, man. What do you want our listeners to walk away with?
That the cost of not pursuing your purpose far outweighs the cost of doing so. That would be the thing I would leave everyone with.
Awesome. Appreciate you, brother. Nice to meet you. Everybody, make sure you go out and get a copy of Max's book. I wrote it down. I'm going to get a copy as well myself. Sometimes I get a chance to listen to people or read people's books before. I think you'll be the first that I've ever actually said after the podcast, I have to go get a copy of the book. So I appreciate that, man. And I've interviewed a lot of really cool people on here and big name people. So I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
My pleasure, Dave.
Thanks for tuning in to the Persistent Entrepreneur Podcast. Remember, I exist to persist, and so do you. Now make sure to check out our tools at davidhill.ai. And for you real estate agents, don't miss the 7-day opportunity to join our community and get full access to our training, coaching, and events. Let's connect on social media, and a big shout out to our sponsor, Vulcan 7, your go-to for the best real estate listing seller data. Visit vulcan7.com/path to mastery for a special offer for our listeners. And guys, don't forget, subscribe to the show, leave us a review, and share your feedback. Let us know if there's a guest you'd like to hear from or what topics you want us to explore. Appreciate you, entrepreneurs. Let's keep going one day, one show at a time. You rock.